This is Jeet, and I'm here with Monica, who's joining us from Toronto. Monica is actually about 1 month post treatment from sort of a full stack of procedures that she's done. She's done facial contouring, body contouring, revision eyelid surgery, and revision rhinoplasty. And we're going to talk with Monica and talk about her whole experience coming to Seoul, before coming to Seoul, having treatment, and what 1 month of recovery has been like. So, Monica, why don't you say hello to our listeners?
Hello.
So tell us about yourself and how did the whole process begin for you?
So I had done research for probably a number of years before I actually decided to pull the trigger and come here. And it took a while to really build up the I'd say confidence and find the right time to come. And once I found myself at a time in my life where I was able to take quite a bit of time off from, after I'd graduated and finished all my schooling, and I wanted to take a break from working, I decided to really just pull the trigger and look more in depth into everything. And one of the first sources I contacted was actually My Seoul Secret. So I started gathering some information from them. I also started sending different clinics online my photos and trying to do the whole online consultation process before I came. But most of them obviously recommend that you come in person to meet with a doctor. So I decided that after I booked the dates that I would spend an entire week, my first week here, just going to in-person consultations. And I thought the more consultations I could have in person, the better informed I'd be and the more comfortable I'd be making my decision ultimately.
And let's talk about the consultation process, like from your first one all the way to your last one. What was that like? What did it feel like? And did you feel like doing more was helping, or was it hurting, or did it eventually, did it give you a lot of good information, or was it too much information? Why don't you share with the listeners, what it's like to go through a consultation?
I think, especially at my first consultation, it was quite overwhelming. It's a lot more strenuous than I thought it would be, having to do, well, especially because I have so many procedures lined up that I had to see multiple doctors, and I had to do x-rays and CT scans and so on and so forth. And they're very draining in the sense that I think they all put a lot of sales pressure on you at a lot of these places in Korea, and especially being there, kind of on my own, and not really having prior knowledge about what exactly to expect. I felt like often I didn't really know if they were being disingenuous, if they were giving me the right prices, and a lot of the places like to start off at a really high price and kind of bargain down to a certain price, and it made me just feel like the entire process was a bit I guess not friendly towards foreigners, in the sense that you could feel like you're being taken advantage of. I also felt like a lot of the places you spend very limited amounts of time with the doctor, so it's really about how you feel with the doctors that ultimately matters at the end of the day. I know that before I came to Korea, I spent a lot of time researching which clinic was the best, and all the reputations of certain clinics, and I think that's really not as important as the feeling you get when you actually meet the doctors and discuss the surgical plans with them, because different doctors will have different recommendations for what you should do to your face or your body, and it's about the level of confidence you find in the doctors themselves and not so much the clinic, the name of the clinic itself. I found that actually as the week wore on, I don't think that doing too many consultations is advisable, because eventually they just become very jumbled and you start getting too much information. It's a bit of information overload. Or, like you say, a paradox of choice. Once you've gone to so many different places and then many of them start sounding great, and then you have a problem trying to decide which place to go to. And I think that at multiple points during the week, I thought I'd made up my mind, and then I would make up all of these reasons why I shouldn't go with a certain place. And it's kind of this sense of buyer's remorse, so you just fear that no matter which place you chose, you don't know if it's the right place, because you start thinking, what if I should actually go to a big hospital, if I should stick to a medium-sized or smaller hospital, and then you just start having too much going on in your head. So I would actually recommend keeping it to just a few consultations, really narrowing down, what kind of hospital or clinic you'd feel comfortable in, depending on, the kinds of procedures you want to do, and then just focusing on your experiences with the doctors themselves.
I think that sounds like a really good game plan. And when you were, one of the things I think we were discussing as you were going through this process is sometimes while you were going through consultations and during and also before, you wanted to validate your decision, and sometimes to validate that you look at secondary information. You might look at other people's experiences or reviews, and these can be sometimes scattered in different places. And I was there ever a point where you were kind of leaning towards the hospital and you might have seen something that further validated that decision, or maybe something that might have made you second guess that decision?
I think one of the hospitals that I really wanted to go with, that initially I actually saw a lot of great positive reviews about on certain forums, like Purse Forum. And what ultimately made me not go with that hospital wasn't really any appearance of any bad reviews, because there's such limited information online, and you don't know how much of it is authentic. And that's one of the scariest parts, I think, is that you don't even know when you're reading the reviews if they're written by someone who's actually had surgery there, or if it's just someone promoting that clinic. So it becomes really difficult to sift through all of the information out there and try to ascertain what is genuine and what isn't, and what is just probably some marketing manager somewhere. So it becomes really difficult to trust secondary reviews as well, secondary sources of information. So I found what ultimately made me not decide to go with that clinic, even though they had really positive reviews online, was just kind of my intuition. I just felt something was wrong from the way that they were pressuring me to sign and commit to surgery the day after. I just felt it was just really off, the feeling I got, that really rushed, uncomfortable feeling where they basically didn't even want me to leave without committing to surgery, and they would put kind of an ultimatum that the price would not be available if I wasn't going to commit to surgery. So those kinds of clinics, I feel, with when the sales pressure is too high, I was just automatically kind of just taken aback, and I just felt instinctively that there must be something going on here for them to be so desperate as to need to close my surgery right away. And I found that with the clinic that I ultimately went with, they were much more flexible with that, and I just felt there was a greater sense of transparency, and that I felt safer. That is ultimately a major thing, because I think a lot of people, when they consider surgery here, safety is a top concern. So, yeah.
And when and can you talk about what was it like going in on the when you decided, and then it was time for the big day, D-Day. What was it like going in, and what was the emotions like, the feelings like, and then also talk about waking up, and what was like day one or waking up from surgery like?
I think leading up to surgery, I was excited and anxious, really anxious. I really wanted to kind of get it over with. And then I just wanted to prepare as much as possible. So, prior to coming, I had bought all the vitamins and the bromelain and the arnica, and I bought pumpkin juice, prepared everything at my hotel. Prepared my bag to take to the hospital, and just tried to focus on doing the logistical things to kind of keep myself calm, and I went out and walked around and spent some time with my friend who lives here, and just tried to really relax the couple of days leading up to it. The morning of, I was just a ball of anxiety. I didn't really sleep much the night prior. I woke up probably around 4 a.m. in the morning and had this very strange moment of like complete mortifying fear. Like I thought, like today is the day I'm going to die. I just had this overwhelming feeling that death was looming for some reason, and it probably has to do with the severity of my surgeries because I was doing so many procedures at once, but. It was just such a hard feeling to shake. So that entire morning, I was just so anxious. And then lying on the surgical table, I started crying, I think, like right before they put the anesthesia kicked in. So, and the first thing they did was the eye surgery. So I had to kind of be awake towards the end of the eye surgery to do the opening and closing and etc. So that was also kind of terrible. But then after that, obviously, it's just a blank slate, and I'm grateful. I remember the first thing I felt when I woke up was gratitude that I was alive. Because I think in that moment, I just thought, okay, the worst possible scenario did not occur.
Okay.
So it can only go uphill from here, like that. At least I'm alive, so that's all. That's my immediate reaction. And then I was kind of just woozy, I suppose, and it was nice to wake up with Jeet there and be able to like tell my fiance, who was very worried, that I was okay, and kind of feel like, okay, now begins the road to recovery. But I do remember being very irritable and anxious even right after surgery, and very scared that I felt a bit nauseated at first, so I was really scared that I would throw up and all of these things. And obviously throwing up is not something you want to do when you have stitches and tubes in your mouth. So it was all kind of just scary, but I think your body is in such a state of shock that you don't really retain too much of that memory. So the first night was kind of a blur. And I remember when they first woke me up and they forced me to like go to the bathroom and rinse my mouth. I thought they were torturing me. I thought they were like purposefully causing me bodily harm just for their own amusement. Because I couldn't help but feel that way because I was in such pain, and it was so difficult to like move around, and I thought it was so ridiculous that they would force me to go and rinse my mouth, and they made me drink nutritional drink, and I just wanted to drink water, and just all of these things. I was very irritable, but and the next morning, for anyone who's doing facial contouring, they take out your tubes, the tubes that are in your mouth, and at that point as well, I felt like they were purposefully causing me harm, and I thought it was just absolutely terrible, and I started having a complete breakdown sitting on that chair demanding to see the doctor because the nurse kept insisting that it was her job to do it, and I said no, there's no way you're going to take these tubes out of my face until I see a doctor. So it was, needless to say, it was quite an emotional and traumatic couple of days, like the 2 days immediately post surgery. But it was great that I got to stay at the hospital, and the nurses were very attentive. And I think it was the right decision for me to stay the extra night at the hospital, especially considering I had done so many procedures. So, all in all, I was really relieved to leave the next day and go back to my hotel, though. And from there on, I just, focused on taking care of myself, really.
Yeah, I think the first time I physically, because we've spoken before, everything on the phone, before you were coming, and then while you were here consulting, and then the first time I actually met you was right after surgery, and I remember it was it's for me it's interesting because I'm so used to that sight now, like seeing someone. Just to kind of, for other people to kind of describe what Monica looked like after surgery. Because when you come out of surgery, you're really disoriented, and sometimes some things are like foggy and things like that. But for me, I'm used to it. But it literally looks like the sight is like someone's been in a major accident. There's tubes, there's IV stuff, all the IV tubes coming out of your arm. There's tubes coming out of your mouth. There's a tremendous amount of swelling. There's a full, compression garments and bandages all around your head. So if anyone is thinking about coming with a family member or a friend or a boyfriend or a husband, it's good to give them a heads up not to freak out, because for me it's like such a normal sight to see now, so it was like business as usual, but that's just like a heads up to, if someone's gonna be there for someone else, is like, because I think sometimes what I've noticed is that I'll be with somebody that came with a family member, and they might get really emotional because when they're seeing that person for the first time, they've never seen them in that state. So it can be like immediately they'll start crying, and sometimes that will freak the patient out. So I was just trying to be like a chatterbox, and I was just like trying to, because the other thing is you also have to stay kind of awake. You can't really pass out, and you can't drink water for a while, which might be really annoying. And so I was just trying to distract you as much as possible, like chit-chatting, like being a motor mouth. But did you feel like one thing I noticed, the kind of you were experiencing, I remember at that time, you were really cold. So we got you more blankets, and we got you the heater to put underneath the blankets. And then you were also describing at the time a lot of like cramps, like in your neck or neck pain and this and that. And then I think you were also, there was like thirst, or there was just kind of like the drainage, the fluids that were coming out and stuff like that. Like, was like, how would you describe? Because it must have been like, some things might have been bearable, unbearable. Or what are some things you want to tell people that were the most uncomfortable parts, and what they could kind of like, try to find the willpower to power through?
I almost think this is one of those things where the less you think about it prior to surgery, the better. Like, I knew to expect certain things just from reading about other people's experiences, like the thirst and not being able to drink. And obviously I expect, and the coldness, I remember reading somewhere that you might feel cold and they have heated beds. But I definitely wasn't expecting, the neck pain, for example. That for me was actually probably one of the more uncomfortable feelings after surgery. And I think the nausea and the fear that I had that the nausea would be something else, But I think everything is bearable. Like all of these things post surgery are bearable. In fact, I think when you wake up after your surgery, most people go through like a period of maybe like elation, like first of all that you're alive, you know? Because prior to surgery, one of the things that I started doing that was very detrimental to my mental stability was like I started Googling clinics and cases of death, you know, because there are cases of death, you know, you cannot, like we're not oblivious to this, you know, and then I just got really wrapped up into it, you know, like I was 2 hours deep on Google reading about like all of these cases and I think one of the things I experienced post surgery was just minor elation at first, just for being alive, and that kind of takes away from the rest of it. You know, just like who cares about the fact that, you know, I'm cold and I'm thirsty and I have neck pain, I'm nauseous, at least I'm alive. Yeah.
And what would you say now, like, you know, going back, if you could kind of go back into time and give yourself advice, like if you can go back, you know, get into a Back to the Future time machine and go right back into the past and give yourself like some pointers and advice, like what would you tell yourself, like or just anyone else out there, like like what are some tips, like some guidelines that you would give them about coming to Korea or researching or planning things, or like what would you say, like if you could summarize it in like 5 or 10, however many it takes, like what would you say are some really good guidelines?
I would say one of my main pieces of advice would be not to rush. So really plan out to have enough time here that you're able to go to the consultations you want to go to and talk to the doctors that you want to talk to, and then maybe plan out to have a couple of days to really think about it. And in that way, you won't be like drawn into forcing to commit to any sales pressure, you know, in the moment. You can walk away from it and take a moment and take a day or two to really collect your thoughts and really think through if, first of all, this is something you really want to do after having talked to the surgeons and after having ascertained what would be the results you will be getting realistically from their point of view. So you start to weigh, you know, the cost benefit and really start to think about whether you really want to do it or not. And then you also have the time to really sit through and think about the consultations you've went to and really map out the pros and the cons of the different places you've been to and figure out as well which place you want to go to. So for the people who just plan on taking like a week or a 2-week trip here and they don't plan any time, so you know you plan on going to the consultation on day 1 and committing on day 2, for example, I think when you feel rushed, you don't feel as mentally and emotionally prepared for the entire thing. And when you have to travel so soon afterwards, I think it might be kind of hard on your body. So I think definitely don't rush, take your time, and just try to be calm when you think through things and not get too anxious and wrapped up in all of like the different forums and the different reviews, because there's always going to be goods and bads at each clinic and everyone has their own unique experiences. So it's really difficult once you've made your decision, especially do not go back and start reading negative reviews and looking for reasons that you shouldn't have committed, because the last thing you want is to be anxious and miserable leading up to your surgery and second guessing yourself leading up to your surgery. So yeah.
Great. And one thing that would you have to say, like when you consulted at, you know, multiple places, they offered, you know, many of them had their own treatment recommendations. There, you know, there's a saying there's multiple ways to skin a cat, and so they probably gave like this clinic would offer this recommendation, and then that might also the prices might vary at different clinics. Now, some clinics might have been significantly cheaper than others, and some might be significantly higher. Like, in your opinion, like, did pricing affect your decision, and what like role did that play, or like treatment recommendations and pricing?
For me, I think pricing was a secondary concern. I was most concerned about the quality of the treatment, and as well that the doctor's recommendations were in line with what I wanted for my body and my face, and ultimately the results that I was trying to achieve. I really wanted to make sure that I found doctors that were going to use the methods that I wanted, and understood the kind of result that I wanted, because I think there really are multiple ways to skin a cat, and there are so many experienced doctors here, and you wouldn't necessarily know what the best, treatment plan for your face or your body is until you've had these opportunities to really sit down and talk to them and see what they've mapped out and planned for you. So I think it's difficult for some people. I think pricing is more of an important consideration, and especially for people who come to Korea hoping to save money on plastic surgery from, like, for example, costs in North America or Europe. I think that you have to keep in mind that a lot of clinics will try to charge foreigners higher prices, but I think it's also because they give foreigners priority and they put a lot of work into foreigners. And it's difficult to be able to talk those kinds of prices down if you're not Korean. But I don't think pricing should be anyone's main concern. I don't think anyone should come here and just go with the clinic that offered them the cheapest overall package for surgery, because I think it really comes down to the treatment plan and the doctor, and that their goals are in line with your goals. And that way you'll be most confident that you can achieve the results that you came here for.
And, there's like multiple ways to go about planning surgery in Korea. Some people will be completely do it yourself. So they fly in here, they're alone, they don't really know anybody here, and it's just them and the clinic directly. Some people will use a traditional medical tour company, which sometimes is the full VIP package. They have a car and this and that, and handhold throughout the whole process. And then we're a little bit of a hybrid, where we kind of, our philosophy is we're the best match for us is users who say, help me do it myself, basically. Like, I want to feel independent and make my own decision. Like, I don't want you to like push me into certain things, but I want you to maybe organize things for me or equip me with information and facts so I can figure it out. Like, from your experience, like, you used our service, and was that helpful? And I know you're like right, like facing me, so so you don't feel free to give some criticism. But what would you say to others? Like, is there pros and cons by going in solo, or is it nice to have assistance? Like, what's your take on that?
I think I got to try it both ways. I set up some of my own consultations, and then I also had a bit of help setting up some consultations through My Seoul Secret. And I think that, it really depends on your own preferences and your level of comfort with navigating, a foreign place, and if you feel like you can take it on your own. at the end of the day, after I made my decision, I actually was really happy that I used My Soul Secret, like the service, because I felt like this particular hospital was one of the places where if I didn't have My Soul Secret as a service and I didn't feel confident that knowing that they would be there for me along the way, that I probably wouldn't have gone with this big of a hospital, because I feel like big hospitals can be intimidating unless you have, like some kind of special treatment, because otherwise you might feel kind of lost in the mix. You might feel like just a number, and you worry about things like shadow doctors and stuff like that. And I felt safer knowing that My Soul Secret was kind of behind me, and in Jeet's words, like I had boots on the ground, feeling like they wouldn't try to, pull one over on me because I wasn't just a random person walking in off the street. That being said, I think with the smaller, like the very boutique-y clinics, that if you went in on your own and they're probably used to dealing with people one-on-one, that you'll also be fine. But it definitely felt safer for me being in a bigger hospital, having My Soul Secret there. And I think one of the services I really liked was that they kept my fiance in the loop throughout, surgery day, and it helped him put his mind at ease a bit, because I remember post-surgery, there was no way I was going to be able to text or call anybody. I was basically blind and immobile and very, very nauseated. So that was really great as well, because I think that especially if you don't have your loved one with you, or you don't really want them to be there, but you want them to know you're okay and they're, somewhere else in the world, that it's great to have this service there as well. Yeah.
Cool. And now what are you what's next for you? And now you've been 1 month in recovery, and so what's next for you, and what do you look forward to?
Well, I will be going home soon, so I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to being reunited with friends and loved ones, and I'm hoping that I'm just hoping that all my results turn out how I want them to turn out, and I'm excited to start the next chapter of my life.
Great. All right. Thanks, Monica. So we just want to say thank you for sharing your experience with our listeners. I think that a lot of people out there are really curious, and I think sometimes it's really nice to hear somebody's real voice and express themselves, as opposed to sometimes reading stuff like text. You can kind of feel people's emotions, and it's a good opportunity to hear their story. So I think that you sharing is definitely going to help a lot of other people who are just getting started. So just wanted to say thank you, and wish you well for the rest of your stay here in Korea, and have a safe journey back.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.